Here's the situation. We're in Rapid City, South Dakota. We're in my basement. We're hanging out. You have been busting your butt for 2 days, slaving over the computer to finish line something really awesome. And you finally got it pushed over the finish line this morning. This big deal. A lot of people helped you with it. You started talking about this ages ago. I couldn't tell you how long. You've been talking about this video, thinking about this video since forever. And today you published it. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Brilliant. The task you were trying to achieve in this video is very simple. You're trying to take two things that are incredibly precise and small and targeted and make them be in the exact same place at the exact same time.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't naturally happen. And I've watched you when I've been in Alabama. I've watched you have your friends over. And you've got elaborate things set up in front of you with clocks and levers and machines and cranks and steam engines. Maybe not those things, but it's elaborate. The workshop that I've seen you goofing around with and the tweaks and everything that you've been making for years. Well, you finally published the video. So you made 2 bullets hit in midair, dude.
It was awesome, man. It was several of us. Been working on it for a really, really long time. We're very, very excited that it happened. Also, I will give you a comment. The plan was show up in Rapid City. Got about 3 days. We were going to hang out. We're going to do some fishing. We're going to do some stuff, record a couple podcasts. And I've stayed up till like 3 a.m. for 2.5 nights.
Yeah.
And I've burned through a lot of our time because of the rendering problems that we've had. And you've been very, very patient. I haven't felt like you were pressuring me because I guess, number one, you get it. You understand what I'm doing. Number two, you understand how important this particular video was to me. And so I would just like to say thank you. First of all, forgive me for that.
No sweat. Of course, nothing to forgive.
Secondly, I appreciate your patience with me because it's been frustrating for me. And by proxy, I know it's probably been frustrating to you, but you've done a good job of not even showing that.
Not showing it because I'm not feeling it.
Great.
So
Thank you.
The timing just happened to work out that this is when it got toward the finish line. Camilla and I were working on plans for dinner or whatnot. She's like, what's Destin doing? Is he hungry? Yeah, he's having rendering problems. He's working something out. He said it'd be about half an hour. And she said,
so 3 days?
Yes. Matt, you have to understand that anytime you say half an hour, we automatically triple it and then triple that. Yeah, I know. So the reason it's easy to be patient is one, because I do the same job as you, just worse. Two, it's because this is as cool a video as has hit the internet in forever. It's legitimately a remarkable achievement. There's a lot of people I know on the internet and root for on the internet. And if they make something I know they worked hard on, I'm going to watch it because I care about them. And the video's pretty interesting. This is a showstopper. Well, it's an amazing achievement.
For me and my buddies, so let me just say, David Linderman, who's a gentleman that goes to church with me, is very intelligent individual. And we spent a lot of time working on this together. He, much like you were patient with me in doing this, David was patient with me on the mechanical side because I started talking about this 5 years ago. No, 5.5 years ago. I've had this idea for a long time. The technology involved in doing this is something that I did in the early to mid 2000s on something else I did. It's been in my head for a while, but 5.5 years ago, I realized, oh, I know how to do it. Like, I know how to do it. You're like going to bed at night and you just kind of like, you're falling asleep and you're like, oh, wow. And then your mind just,
yep,
everything clicks into place and you get the perfect 4 lines in Tetris and whatever the thing is. Yeah. So that happened. And I was like, whoa, not only can this happen, it will happen. And this is how it will happen. It's been a thing I've been slow rolling in the back of my mind for years because I wanted it to be done right. And so I got several people involved. My buddy Ernie, who was in the Navy back in the 80s, and he's really good at circuitry and stuff. Jeremy Fielding, dear friend to both of us, who's really good at mechanical design. He designed a critical element of this, and David. And so we all worked together on it, and it was just a blast, man. Or actually, it was 2 blasts.
I see what you did.
Anyway, I'm excited about it. So thanks for the mental high five that you're giving me here. I appreciate that. It's very much an us and we thing, and it was a team effort. And George as well.
Yeah.
We had a very, very tight window to get this done.
About the size of a bullet?
Well, there's that, just the physical things about it. But there's also, when you do videos on YouTube, it's weird because you have all these external pressures that a lot of people don't think about. And we had a time commitment that we had to, hey, in order for this to work, you have to do it within a certain time.
Right. And you can't afford to make the video sometimes.
Right.
When it's an expensive video to make that requires equipment and help and time, you can't afford to make it without having a really good and committed partner to help make it happen. But also they have pressures and times of year that things need to happen and deadlines for when things need to come out. And so I'm sure it looks to an outsider like people like you who make awesome videos, just do it and you just get to it when you get to it. But you're not as in control as that. There really is a window. And if this project is going to happen, it has to be now and it has to be by this point. And so the reason I asked you to walk in here and turn on mics without really knowing what I wanted to talk about was because you are in that place where the baby is born. You did it.
We did it.
You got it done.
A big thing that George did, for example, like this is how weird it got towards the end. We were waiting on weather. So first of all, we have to do it in the spring or the summer because we have to have light for the high-speed cameras. We've had the hardware for ages, and we just couldn't do it. We were just waiting on the right meteorological conditions. And then we wanted to do it early in the month, and then we got a week of rain. And you're like, okay, well, I can't do it then. Then 5-day forecast comes up, and it's like, okay, looks like we got a window. And then the Met team got it wrong. And so we had one day of sunlight, and the rest was rain that week. And so the following week, it's like, all right, well, it's do or die. And so we went out every day, David and I, and we worked on it every single day. We filmed a ton of stuff. I was processing high-speed camera data, which in itself takes a long time to do. And then I would run back at night to the computer, and I would start uploading, and then George would take all of that mountain of data. Imagine 5 cameras running 6 hours a day. You have a terabyte of data every day.
Yeah, and it occurs to me, the third chair might not know who George is. George is our mutual, very good friend, former Hollywood producer, comedian, storyteller.
Good person.
Just a good, honorable man across the board. There are people you meet who choose the right thing every time, even if people aren't watching. And he got a great upbringing from his parents. His dad was a judge.
A federal judge.
Who had a very clear sense of integrity in that role and passed it along to his kid. Just to be clear, George is not just some guy.
He works with me at Smarter Every Day.
He's important to both of us.
Yeah, absolutely, on a personal and a professional level. But one thing he does is the best idea wins. And so it's important to surround yourself with good sounding boards that are morally aligned. And it's also important to surround yourself with people that will tell you no. And he's one of those people. And we knew each other as friends long before we ever started working together. In fact, I met George in a very similar way to how you and I met. We, saw what each other was doing on the internet, and we had a conversation, and we're like, you know what? As an adult, I'm going to decide to be your friend.
I have a friend slot currently.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, that sounds funny, but I think it's important to identify when you have a friend slot and figure out who you want to plug into that.
We are nowhere near done with the bullet conversation, but I want to pull on that thread just a little bit. How do you know when you have a friend slot?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know. What's your answer to that? Like right now at this phase in life, we both have children and the fuse is burning and we have a limited amount of time left. We're counting summers that we have left with certain children. I remember walking into my friend's office one day. He's about 10 years down the road from where I'm at. It's somewhere between 8 and 10 years. And I walked in the room. We were going to jump on a call together to talk to some people or whatever. And he's like, yeah, go ahead and shut that door. And I shut the door, and on the back of his door, there was, I don't remember if it was a dry erase thing or like a big Post-it note or something.
I was guessing the Cindy Crawford Sports Illustrated 1988 bathing suit poster that you were allowed to buy at Walmart.
No, that's not.
Okay.
That's not what's there. But it was almost like a vision board. And he's more mature than I am, just in all the ways. And it said something like, all his big projects that are his, and I'm not going to repeat what they are, but they're honorable and they're big, good things that make the world better. And then this word, and then it had time and like the key items, this word and all this. And then it just said kids, and it said 6 years. And I looked at that and I said, what is this? And, we were supposed to talk about something else. He goes, oh, that's how many years I have left with them under my roof. And I said, that's a big deal. And I had never thought that way. It simultaneously hurt.
Yeah.
And also motivated me to be like, man. And so right now, friend slots are precious and don't really have any. Because, like you and I were talking the Deepwater last night when we had an option to turn on microphones and we decided not to because we needed to catch up on personal things in each other's lives. Those friend slots just don't exist at the moment. I kind of stole your thunder because you kind of said that yesterday. We were talking about intentional relationships, and you were like, I'm going to plug in all the time I can with the kiddos. And so I guess that's how I know I have an open friend slot. How do you know?
If I've got windshield time and I got nobody to call. If you're traveling, a couple other friends are busy, and I'm driving along, oh my God, but I have 20 minutes. I should use this time to catch up with somebody.
That is so right.
What a hollow feeling when you just look at your phone and you kind of scroll through your speed dial. No, I can't. No, they're busy. I guess it's just me. I guess I'll just think about some things.
I wonder if introverts feel this as well, or if it's just us, the extroverts.
I'm an introvert.
You're not an introvert, Matt. Matt, you are the least introverted person I know.
You're the least introverted person. Your face
is the least introverted.
I knew it was going to happen eventually. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm not as extroverted as I maybe once was. I will say that about myself.
Okay.
I am able to appreciate time by myself more than I used to. But I think about those friend slots, those inventory slots. What a way to dehumanize my friends. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, at times you got room and the rhythm can change from time to time in terms of just who you have a project going with or whatever. And some friends kind of come and go out of your life a little bit because of circumstances, but then some others are just sort of permanent and they're on the windshield time dial list automatically. Yeah, okay, the point is all these people in your life are awesome. And I respect you for giving a mountain of credit to everyone else.
What are you talking about in the video?
Yeah, and it's true. You're not just blowing smoke or trying to deflect. All those people really did contribute hugely. I watched it happen. This episode of No Dumb Questions is brought to you by RAYCON, who makes earbuds that we both use all the time and like a ton, and they've been a friend of the show forever. Destin, what do you like about RAYCONs?
RAYCON, they're simple. You stick them in your pocket. It's like a little pill, got 2 earbuds in it, and carry it everywhere with you. It's like an everyday kind of carry thing. They just do what they're supposed to do. Low profile in the pocket. They're very cost effective. I think it's great to have them.
I got one of my daily carry sets of RAYCONs right here. This is the blue one. In my phone in the Bluetooth list, this is labeled blue RAYCONs because of the color. And this is what it sounds like when you hold that RAYCON pill.
What? Am I supposed to be able to hear that?
Pretty helpful?
No, I couldn't hear it.
Let me hold it. No, I'm going to hold it louder.
Okay. I can't hear that, Matt.
Well, I'm moving it in my hand, so my hands, when they interact with the plastic case,
you're so dumb.
Listen harder.
I'm listening. Oh yeah. The holding. Yeah, that's what I hear.
Seriously.
The problem I have with RAYCONs, and I do have a problem.
Never made an ad before.
I know.
Okay, tell me.
My problem with RAYCONs is that my family steals them. I have them, and I put them on my right there on my sink in the bathroom, and then they go away, and I'm supposed to go back and get them, and they're not there, and that's a problem. So the only solution is to go to buyraycon.com/NDQ, and NDQ listeners can get 15% off their RAYCON order. So just go, get whatever you want, buyraycon.com/NDQ, get 15% off.
Okay. I, a moment ago, suggested that you were being amateurish for not hearing me holding the RAYCON case and that this was your first time. And then you made that glorious, beautiful segue.
I know.
I mean, I can't ask for better. I think it's why people are here. That was insane. I'm humbled, and I apologize for my earlier criticism.
Wait till you get this. I'm going to tell you some of the perks of RAYCONs. They have a 32-hour battery life, including 8 hours of playtime, so you can get to listen to what you want, when you want, for a really long time. They have custom gel tips for your ear hole size. That's my favorite part because it's fun to talk about people's ear holes. And then, they start out at about half the price as other premium audio brands, but they sound just as good.
That's 50%.
What? Yeah, 50%. I mean, that's half the price.
That's math.
And they also come with a 45-day happiness guarantee. So you can't lose. You just try it out. If you don't like it, just be like, hey, I didn't like it. There you go.
Yeah, about that simple. So you can create your own soundtrack with RAYCON right now. NDQ listeners, which includes you and me because I listen to this podcast, we can get 15% off our RAYCON order at buyraycon.com/NDQ. That's buyraycon.com/NDQ to save 15% on Raycons. And then just the last bullet point here in the talking points that Raycon has provided us is Destin sings the Raycon jingle.
Nope, it doesn't say that. Doesn't say that.
We might have different. I'm scrolling.
Doesn't say that.
I mean,
sorry.
That's
buyraycon.com/NDQ.
Feel like you're not looking closely. But I want to get to the heart of the matter, which is you figured out a way to make two bullets hit each other in midair and film the collision. I guess my question is, how does one do that?
So the trick is, it's all a timing thing. I mean, the alignment is easy. You can accomplish a tremendous amount with threaded fasteners and just bolts and screws and creating things that can pivot and you can adjust it in fine ways. That's how you do the alignment of the barrels. But the timing is the trick, actually. So there's this thing that all weapons have. It's called lock time. And let's say you have a revolver. It's the easiest thing to conceptualize. And let's say
a revolver, just for people who aren't into guns at all, we're talking about a handgun.
This is what you would see a cowboy have and Tombstone.
It's got the little spinny cylinder right there in the middle of the gun. I fire 5 shots, 6 shots. It's a spinny kind, so it'll usually have a hammer.
Well, let's just go to why a revolver exists.
Okay.
This is interesting. I had a friend named Wally who had an old Navy pistol. And so if you think back to the Civil War, the action was, brass cartridge technology for bullets had not been developed. So the bullet is the part up front that's either copper or gray lead, right?
That's the part that flies.
That's the part that flies. And the brass part in the back, the yellowish metal part, that's the part that contains the powder.
And what do we call that part?
The cartridge.
Okay.
And at the very, very back, you have a primer. And the primer is usually it's got a chemical in it. I want to say lead styphenate. I don't know what it is.
That sounded like chemistry.
That sounded like chemistry. I don't know. It's something, or is it, no, mercury fulminate.
I thought it might be sodium glutamate. That sounded like chemistry.
Is it mercury? What is it?
That's also chemistry.
Anyway, it's a chemical.
Okay.
So you got this chemical in the back in this little metal cup. It is sensitive to shock and friction and heat. And if it hits a certain value of all those things, it'll explode. It'll detonate.
Is that detonation what projects the bullet, or is that lighting something else on fire?
Yeah, that lights something else. It's the thing that lights the gunpowder most often.
So there's 3 stages here. The initial ignition,
which is a detonation. It's a supersonic burning. This is important. So that's a detonation.
Okay.
The powder burning on the inside of the cartridge is a deflagration. That is a subsonic burning of the powder.
Okay. And then that creates a
pressure.
Supersonic, not all the time, but in some cases, a supersonic projectile.
It can, yeah, depending on the design of the barrel length, the chamber pressure, and a lot of stuff.
The amount of explosive.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. And so when we're sitting there thinking about how to do this, we're like, okay, well, what we're ultimately trying to do is replicate 2 bullets that hit each other in Fredericksburg in December 1862.
What was going on in Fredericksburg in December of 1862?
Is it 1862 or 63? I don't remember. Give me grace on that. I don't have Wikipedia in front of me. But the United States Civil War. And so you had two sides that were going at each other, and there were a lot of people shooting rifles at each other really, really fast. What's interesting about that is somewhere on that battlefield, a Yankee soldier and a rebel soldier were on 2 sides of a field, and they shot at each other. And the bullets that they fired traveled across the field toward each other, and they hit nose to nose somewhere on that battlefield.
That's a metaphor for the Civil War.
It is. It's like when an unstoppable force hits an unstoppable force, they hit each other, and they created a plane, an intercept plane that happened. And so you have this axial bullet flying along its flight axis and another one flying in the other direction. And when they hit nose to nose, the momentum equation balances and they stop. They stop each other.
So I'm to believe that display that I've seen, video that you shot, that display with the bullet kind of in the other bullet is reflective of something where two bullets came right at each other, they hit, and they just dropped to the ground. They nullified the momentum of each other equally or close to equally.
I don't know.
I hadn't thought about that.
Well, that's the way people think it happened. But here's another interesting thing. Sometime in the future, from 1862, 1863, I'd really like to know the answer to that. I've got it in the video. Do you mind looking that up?
Not a problem.
Somewhere in the future, there was a person. They were probably a hobbyist, or maybe they were a professional archaeologist. They were running over that battlefield, and they were either just, maybe the field was plowed up for a farmer, and a person was walking the field looking for artifacts and bullets. I found arrowheads when I was younger down by the Tennessee River. When the farmers would plow the fields, that's when you would go walk and look for arrowheads. And sometimes you'd find them. Was it 62 or 63?
Right at the end of 62.
December 1862.
December 62, which means,
early part of the Civil War.
Either way, because early part of the Civil War, though, in Fredericksburg, Virginia.
So the thought is this person found these bullets, and they're like, oh, wow, look at this. And they look at it, and they're like, this is two bullets. If you look here, there's the back of a bullet on one side, and there's the back of a bullet on the other side, and there seems to be a plane where they mushroom against each other, and they spread out. That's incredible. Your brain, my brain, instantly imagines what that dynamic event was like. It plays it out. It says, okay, well, there was a person with a rifle on this side and a person with a rifle on that side.
Both with dreams and ambitions and parents. And
they fired at each other, and those bullets hit. And the bullet didn't go to where it was trying to go. It stopped right there. And so, there's another part of your brain that plays out, wow, what happened because those bullets hit and didn't go to their intended target? That's interesting.
Yeah, and to be clear, you've spent a lot of time working on defensive systems when it comes to ballistics, weaponry, etc. Where would you rank on a scale of, let's say, 0 to 100 as a defensive strategy for when bullets are being shot at you? Just trying to shoot the bullets down with another bullet before it hits you.
You know what you just asked me. And there's stuff I haven't told you. I will never tell you. But
I got stuff I haven't told you before.
Yeah. How about that?
I kissed this one girl in 10th grade.
Yeah.
And I did not like her anymore after that.
Really?
Yeah. So I got stuff I don't tell you too, is the point.
Oh.
I got stuff that's classified.
It's really interesting. That question is really, really interesting because when you pull the trigger on a rifle, it starts to fly. It's on a ballistic trajectory. And so what that means is you have to detect the launch of the other projectile.
Mm-hmm.
You have to track it and calculate its future trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Because bullets don't just go on lines?
They don't.
Like lasers?
No, they don't. Not like they do in Star Wars.
Is it just because of gravity and wind?
Well, air resistance, yeah. Drag. There's all kinds of other things. Like the fact that the bullet is spinning matters because the Magnus effect comes into play and the bullet will fall in a certain direction. There's so much.
Bend it like Barrett.
Yeah. Beckett? Barrett.
Well,
Barrett.
I was just switching it over to a gun reference.
Oh, I see. That's good. So it's very interesting to think about all that. And then let's say you're able to calculate where that bullet is at with perfect knowledge, and you're able to calculate the last 10 milliseconds of where that bullet is. And if it was a supersonic bullet, I just remember speed of sound is about a foot per millisecond. And that's a really good back of the envelope kind of thing. So if you had 10 milliseconds of data, you'd have 10 feet of flight tracking. You would then say, okay, well, I have a ballistic device on my end. I get to choose where I point it, and I get to choose when I ignite it.
A hyper-accurate late 1850s model muzzle-loading rifle.
Right.
Yep, hyper reliable.
Exactly. So if I was going to track something in flight, let's make it easier. Let's say it's a mortar. A mortar that goes up, and then falls down on you, and it goes to terminal velocity as it's falling. So you have to figure out where it is, and then you have to calculate where it's going to be. And in that equation, you have to say, well, it takes my thing X amount of milliseconds to get from here to there because it flies at a certain velocity. Oh, by the way, that's not a constant velocity. That's a decreasing velocity because of drag. So I have to say, well, if I point it here, I can shoot now. But if I wasn't able to get the shot off, I can point over here and anticipate it being there, but I'm not going to slow my bullet down. So you have to anticipate all these things. There's this fancy pants math thing called a Kalman filter.
Oh.
And a Kalman filter uses past data or data you know about a system to predict what you're going to do in the future. This is how wars are fought.
It's also how I catch footballs when they're thrown at me.
Exactly.
I can run this algorithm.
Yeah.
Just there's a certain speed at which my on-the-fly calculations can't keep up. Too much data, too fast, and I just can't run that. It's why, I don't know about now, but it's why steadily I could hit a ball in the upper 80s if it didn't have too much movement on it playing baseball. And if I knew that a guy was just grooving pitches in the low 90s, I've faced that, and I could put a bat on that consistently. When that guy moved his finger, I was facing a major leaguer in this particular batting cage session. When he moved his finger a little bit off of the seams and put the tiniest bit of cut on that low 90s fastball, I hadn't seen anything like that before.
No
and
chance.
That exceeded my calculation speed. I simply could not make the bat that I was throwing, in a sense, at that position that I was anticipating the ball being at. It broke my calculator.
I love the way you said that. Because the beautiful thing about swinging a bat is you're defining a plane.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a pie-shaped piece of space that the bat can occupy in the amount of time it takes for the baseball to traverse the plate.
Okay.
That's a fun thought. I've never thought about that, the way you just said that. That's great. Thank you for that.
Well, it's just one of those things where we all do this thing you're describing with mortars and with running this Kalman filter. It's just we can only do it at a very basic, slow level. And the stuff you're talking about grossly exceeds our ability to calculate. And the idea...
Human brains are great at this.
They are great at this.
Great at this. I'm going to throw this at your face right now.
Why would you do that? Get that crap out of here.
You didn't even try to catch it.
I'm going to knock that all the way across the room. And then I'm going to wag
Why are you
my
standing
finger.
over me wagging your finger in my face?
Because, you asked for it. You threw a thing at me and now it's over there.
So that's interesting that you were able to calculate that. But
bring that crap into my house.
In this particular case, we wanted to figure out how to hit a bullet with a bullet. And so what do? You start systematically eliminating every variable. We want it to fly in a straight of a line as possible. An added benefit, if we can create symmetry, then the math gets even easier.
Wait, so if you want to smash a bullet into a bullet and you want it to fly into as straight a line as possible, there are two things you can do. One, you can shoot the bullets harder so that they maintain their forward velocity without degradation on that flight path longer. Or two, you can shoot the bullets slower, but move the two firearms closer.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so we wanted it to be in free space. We wanted the bullet intercept to be out in the middle of something. So I bought an I-beam.
Okay.
It's about 12 feet long.
Apple makes those?
No. Idiot. I think technically this was called an H-beam.
Okay.
I learned there's a difference. The idea was, well, if I can bolt a gun to one side and I can bolt a gun to the other side, then that handles all the geometry problems. I'm going to pick one of the guns to be stationary, and I'm going to try to move the other one to it to align them.
Obviously. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that.
You don't move both of them at the same time. You're just like, okay, this is my datum, and then align that one to this one. Yeah. And so that's step one, eliminate the geometry problem. Step two, eliminate the timing issue associated with lock time. That Yankee had a certain type of rifle, and that Rebel had another kind of rifle. And they had mechanisms. They didn't have a primer in a cartridge like we do now, where you've got that little percussion primer, meaning you hit it percussively and it explodes. They didn't have that in a cartridge. What they had is probably a muzzle loading rifle.
Like the one behind you on the wall. That's exactly that era rifle. Go grab it.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to get it.
What you have there is Johnny Bannon's rifle. That's the one that my grandfather, the marksmanship instructor, who
really
taught people how to shoot for years and years here at the base, Ellsworth Air Force Base, where we're right next to here in South Dakota. That is the rifle that he learned to shoot on in Bannon's Holler, Iowa. Johnny Bannon, for whom Bannon's Holler was or is named, showed him how to shoot on that, and that's a Civil War era design. I think the rifle itself was manufactured just a little bit after the Civil War.
It's beautiful. What's interesting about it is there's no breech.
Right.
Like you don't put the bullet in the back.
Right.
Like on an AR-15, you pull the bolt back and you put a bullet in there. This is like a long pipe that's closed on the backside.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if the ramrod will come out.
Okay, I just won't. Let's just don't do it. It's old wood.
But describe what you were reaching for there.
So the ramrod is underneath the barrel, and so you pull the ramrod out. And so what you do is, this is like a pipe with only one end open. That's the barrel. And so what you do is you take your gunpowder.
Mm-hmm.
In the Civil War, they had paper cartridges, and so you had this. It looks kind of like a half a cigar, and so you have a lead bullet, then you have some paper, and then you have the gunpowder all wrapped in one little. That was a cartridge then, and so you take out that cartridge and you take your teeth and you bite off the end of the paper, and then you point this barrel to the sky,
mm-hmm.
and then you pour that gunpowder down the end of the barrel, and then you take some of that paper and you shove it down in there on top of the powder.
Okay.
And then you can tamp that down into the, way back here in the back of the barrel. And do they put the bullet in first before they tamp it with the ramrod, or they?
My understanding is they did.
Okay. So I didn't
but
know
that's my understanding.
But sometimes what they did is they'd put beeswax on the bullets too, so you get a good seal in the bore of the rifle.
I've wondered about that.
Yeah. What's really cool is, so you got this, and way back here at the back of the rifle, there's this mechanism, and I'm going to cock it now, and then I'm going to pull the trigger. Is this unloaded?
It is unloaded and has been for several generations.
Also, I can tell that there's not an issue here because this little part right here, there's a nipple on the back that is like a little bitty hole that's drilled into the base of that powder. And if I was about to try to fire this thing, what I would do is I would kind of poke a little piece of wire in there to make sure I had a clear path to the powder. And then I would put a percussion cap over that nipple with that mercury fulminate, or I'm wondering if lead styphenate was the tracer stuff.
Is it monosodium glutamate?
Shut up. So we have to, by the end of this episode, we have to know what chemical percussion primers are. So anyway, you put the little percussion cap on there, and then when you pull the trigger, this hammer falls and hits that nipple, like so.
I'm so glad that didn't fire.
Yeah.
I would have just hated that. That would have been the most embarrassing thing ever, and I wouldn't have edited it out, and we would have turned this into an episode about gun safety.
Yeah. So it's really neat. This is a really neat rifle. I've never had one. Do you know what type of rifle this is? I don't know. It's really lightweight compared to rifles like this I've seen.
Is that an Enfield rifle?
I don't know. It's amazing, though. It's beautiful. That Yankee and that Rebel, when they were firing at each other, they each did that. And if you can imagine, there's a spring on the other side of this hammer. When I cock that thing and pull it, that spring has to accelerate the hammer, and the hammer has to go fall and boom, land right there against that percussion cap, and that takes time. If a bullet travels 10 feet in 10 milliseconds, and it takes that hammer 40 milliseconds to fall, or 10 milliseconds to fall, whatever it is, the amount of time it takes for that hammer to fall is important, and that's called the lock time.
Didn't know there was a term for that.
Yeah,
lock time.
Lock time. And then the amount of time it takes once the primer is struck and the burning process starts. You get the detonation and the deflagration and the pressurization of the barrel that starts pushing the bullet down. And if you think about it, the volume of that burning is changing as it moves down the barrel. All that is called the bullet dwell time, the amount of time that it takes for the first spark to happen to when the bullet exits the barrel.
Okay, so we're active, but we're not out of the barrel yet. That's the
bullet dwell time.
Bullet dwell time. Okay.
Yeah, so you've got lock time and you've got bullet dwell time. Lock time, typically around 10 milliseconds. Bullet dwell time, depending on the powder, depending on all the things, you're looking at more like a millisecond and a half. So 1.5 thousandths th of a second.
So super hard to dodge.
Yeah, it is. All that being said, in our problem, if we were to try to shoot a bullet with revolvers, for example, that's difficult because that lock time is not predictable because friction, and it's different every time. The aha moment was, oh, wow, we can't shoot at the same time. I think Adam Savage and Jamie at Mythbusters, they tried this a while back. I did not watch the entire episode, but I remember a scene of them having a pistol and they had some way of pulling the trigger. I think it was a string. I don't remember exactly how the rest of it went down, but Adam's great.
Adam is great.
Adam's an awesome dude.
I had a chance to chat with him recently at an event, and he was very charitable with his time.
That's it. The lock time is the issue. It's not repeatable. And if you had a way of deleting the lock time from all the equations, the math problem would simplify. And that's what we did.
Let's let that question hang there for 1 second. I see the conundrum. You've done a great job of explaining it. And I'll admit, I did not initially see the conundrum. We'll just pull the triggers at the same time. Clearly, you can't just grab it with your hand or both hands and be like, all right, ready, 1, 2, 3, and time it with your brain. You're telling me that even if you could do that in a way that was safe and you can't, even if you physically pulled both triggers at once, the specificity of time we're talking about here,
microseconds matter.
Yeah, it's not going to be uniform. Even with your brain physically controlling your fingers, you won't get it quite right.
What would be interesting is if you took your fingers, like you were just trying to pull you had two imaginary pistols in your hands, you were trying to pull the triggers at the same time with your trigger finger. What would be interesting is to take your two fingers and try to tap them on a table at the exact same time. 3, 2, 1. That sounded like the same time.
I think that's a rhythm question. My friend Jeff, who does all the music for the TMBH, 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, he's ridiculous. His awareness of tempo and his fine muscle control, that's not natural, what he's able to do. My guess would be that if we got out the Phantom and we did a synchronization of both hands competition between Jeff and somebody who's a musical hack, Jeff would annihilate them, and we would see it in super slow motion, that his taps would indeed be synchronized. And the other person, I think, would have trouble syncing up their two hands to the same degree.
But it's an interesting problem, right? Because
it's an interesting problem.
Because it's a distance thing. Like, where does the contact between the drumstick and the drum head actually happen? In the drum problem, that's very interesting because that gets into the vibration of the drum head itself. It's in different places depending on where it is in the amplitude, and if it's a bass drum versus if it's a snare drum. That's interesting. Never thought about that before.
Well, and even what we were talking about years ago in terms of how a snap happens, the actual sound of the snap occurs after the friction is released. All that kinetic energy built up is now free to fly, or the potential energy that's built up becomes kinetic. And it's when you hit the fat part of your thumb. So I think I can make these snaps match.
I could actually hear that it wasn't.
That's not matched.
Wow, I was like 100 milliseconds off.
Yeah. That was pretty close. It's hard.
That's very hard. That's a great illustration because most firearms have a device called a sear mechanism in them. And so what the sear is...
Can you spell that?
SEAR.
Sear. Okay.
I think, man, you got me questioning everything today. Just like on snapping your finger. Man, it's a great explanation, man. I appreciate it. This is helping me. The fact that you don't really know when your finger is going to break friction with your thumb and start accelerating towards the fat of your hand. The sear is the same way. You don't really know where the sear is going to quit. You know, imagine trying to slide, like you have a pencil and you're moving it off a table. When does it actually break free of contact and start moving? So that matters depending on if there was a little piece of dust in the sear mechanism between one shot and the next. Is, you know, the heat is going to change the timing because the sear pawl itself, or whatever the word of it, if it's hotter, it's going to be longer because of things. I mean, there's so many things that go into that, and yeah, it's fascinating. So
you had to figure out a way. Okay, still, the conundrum is set up really well. I am super understanding that, and intuitively, without just thinking about it, I'd be like, well, how would you do this thing? Well, you just pull the triggers at the same time. Like, I don't know, get some string or something.
Yeah.
And then just be like, 1, okay, wait, are we going to pull it on 3 or where 4 would be?
Right.
Let's go where 4 would be. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, click.
Boom.
And I would think you could get pretty close with that. But I understand as we think about snapping, as we think about double tapping on the desk, drumming, I understand why, no, that's not, I mean, at the level of specificity and precision we need, that's not good enough.
So let's say we wanted to put a solenoid on those triggers, like a little, a electromagnetic coil that pulls the trigger, because our fingers just can't be repeatable enough.
Sure.
Would you want it to be like a really strong coil, like something you'd plug into the wall, or would you want it to be something you'd run off batteries?
I don't know which better achieves this. What I would want is something that has a very predictable breaking point.
You want batteries. And the reason you want batteries is because the AC power that's coming out of that wall right there has a 60 hertz cycle. There's a sine wave going up and down and up and down and up and down. And depending on if you trigger it at the top of that wave or at the nodal point where there's literally no voltage, or at the bottom of that wave, there's a 16.67 millisecond variance.
That's way too much.
That's too much.
Way too much.
That's 16 feet if you're supersonic. And so you can't use AC power. That's out the door. You have to use DC power. What kind of solid state electronics do you want to use? Because we want to get things that trigger at the same time, right? Or are we going to use solid state, or are we going to use relays, like clicking relays? No, you're going to use solid state electronics, right? And so all this stuff matters. And the threshold voltages on, certain pieces of silicon can matter. It depends on what you're doing. There's things that have to happen. Like, imagine these collisions that they do in these particle accelerators. Not an exaggeration, like femtoseconds matters.
I've never even heard that term.
So my brain thinks because of working with timing of stuff like this for weapons and stuff, I have a fundamental unit of time in my head, and it's not seconds, it's not minutes, it's not hours, it's milliseconds. And I even think in microseconds as well. I don't think in microseconds. You understand what I'm trying to say, right?
I think in 129 point something of a second. Do you know why?
Frame rate of a camera.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to think in seconds. Now I think in roughly 1/30th of a second for what I control, what I do. For example, if your bit rate, it's okay if people don't know what this means, but it's just the bit rate in which your audio was encoded on your camera, which has your just clumsy camera microphone on it. It's not going to sound good, but it's just giving you a comparable audio. And you record, say, on the equipment we're recording on right now, these Rode microphones.
These will do up to like 192, won't they? 192 kilohertz, is that right?
250, yes, at least.
More than that?
Yeah, but if the bit rate is just slightly different, then what happens is you get audio drift over the course of syncing the audio to the video. So your audio source is separate. You put them together, it sounds fine at first. But you'll notice an hour into a file, oh, this sounds terrible. You actually go in when it sounds wrong to your ear, and you go all the way down to a single frame view, your tightest view in a sequence, an editing window. You know this. The actual issue is 1/30th of a frame, 1/30th of a second is the issue that you're actually contending with that just makes the audio insufferably echoey. You can hear it. Your brain knows it's not synced at 8 milliseconds is the point.
Makes you angry. Yeah.
It makes you angry.
It does make me angry. There's a video I have on the channel right now that I know it was wrong and it bothers me, and I want to be able to fix it, but I can't. All these things add up and they matter.
Yeah.
So this percussion primer becomes the issue. It's the striking of the percussion primer that's the issue, because it even gets more interesting there. Like if we were able to do it with percussion primers, the threshold of mechanical deformation required to trigger the chemical would matter. Meaning, the moment the hammer starts to hit the percussion primer, it has to crush it and move it into the chemical in order to create the friction required.
And it might deform at a different rate than the opposite cartridge.
Yes, depending on the day it was formed, depending on the alloy of brass.
How much air there was in the mixture, in the pour.
The stoichiometry.
Wow.
On the day that it was made. All that stuff matters. It's super cool. And so anyway, you got to think about all kinds of things you don't normally think about. And then you start going through and you do a time budget and you're like, okay, well, there's my tolerance stack up. Okay, there, I could be off by 5 microseconds right there. I could be off by whatever. My spring might not be repeatable. All these different things. And so the obvious answer is get rid of all of the mechanical mechanisms that trigger that percussion primer. There's a thing that's used now all the time in the Olympics.
You mean human growth hormone?
No.
Oh.
No, sorry. Marksmanship in the Olympics often comes down to a shooter's ability to predict this lock time. Because if you think about holding a firearm, this gets even more interesting. A human holding a firearm, when you pull the trigger, to every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you're moving a physical hammer into a firing pin means that the gun itself has to move in response to that.
Yes.
So the heavier the gun, the lower the distance it will move in response to the acceleration of the hammer itself.
Yes, I've seen TikTok videos of dudes handing their girlfriends a shotgun and they don't shoulder it. They're holding it like above their shoulder. And I'm thinking, oh, you're just not familiar with this principle yet. That gun has to go backwards after you pull that trigger.
I'm talking about even before you pull the trigger. Look at this rifle right here. I'm holding it. When I pull the trigger,
you're talking about the action of the trigger.
This hammer is moving forward.
And the trigger pull is moving backwards.
Well, there's that. What has to happen? There's a momentum thing that has to happen.
Yes.
So the gun has to physically move backwards, or at least push backwards.
Yeah, you can restrict that with resistance, I would assume. I mean, I would assume you could nullify that.
Yes, you can if you have something rigid enough. So that's important, right?
Yeah.
But in the Olympics, can you do that? No, you have to hold the gun.
Sure.
What do? So that lock time and the movement of the gun while you're pulling the trigger, both because you're using muscles at the trigger place and because the hammer's moving and stuff like that, like you just got to think all the way down to the nitnoid details. That's going to affect where you shoot. And so a good shooter would be able to predict that and be able to compensate for that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another one. The rifling direction inside the barrel matters.
I figured it all went the same way.
Yeah, it does. But if that's left or right, if I take a gun and I point it down range and I pull the trigger, I want a certain twist direction on my rifling if I'm a right-handed shooter versus if I'm a left-handed shooter. Because,
really?
Yes, because you're taking the bullet and you're spinning it up.
Of course.
You don't get that force for free. You're imparting the counter torque into the gun. So when you're shooting, does the gun come straight back?
No.
Where does it go?
No. It pushes out to the side of my shoulder. Like
Yeah,
away from my shoulder and body. Just
so
a small amount.
So you're holding the pistol out and you pull the trigger. It doesn't come straight back in plane. It goes a little bit to the side.
That's why it looks so unnatural in the original Star Wars when Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford are firing those prop blasters. Carrie Fisher is just like a child with a pa-choo, and it doesn't go anywhere that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it betrays the special effect because the performance is great. I mean, it's a charming movie. I'm not going to criticize Carrie Fisher. The performance there takes away the believability. It wrecks the suspension of disbelief because, well, one, that gun just wouldn't kick because of what it's shooting. But two, it definitely wouldn't kick like that. And so it just looks unnatural and weird. But you see somebody shoot an actual gun.
You got me thinking now. I think a laser pistol would kick. At least it did in Men in Black.
Why would it kick?
Is it force?
It's light.
Is it force?
It's light.
I'm just asking the question.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
But how much force would it take for light to cause your firearm to kick? It's not even a firearm, your light arm to kick.
I don't know. Have you ever seen a little device called a radiometer?
No.
I'm going to ship you a radiometer.
Thanks.
So it's a little globe with a vacuum in it and a little needle pointing straight up and looks like a windmill.
My needle always points straight up.
That's a little windmill. And you've got
that wasn't dirty.
Black paint.
I mean, optimism.
Black paint on one side and white paint on the other.
Okay.
One side of the little windmill will absorb light and the other side will repel light and it'll spin just from light pressure. This is a thing. Like light sails are a thing. Spacecraft have to account for solar pressure.
You're right. But is that enough to make it kick?
I don't know. It's you've taken me to a really fun. I don't know the answer to that, but it's fun to think about.
I don't. I mean, it's held out in Star Wars as being a killing blow. It's enough.
It knocks you down,
and they're bolts of light, which is
when you get hit with the red beam from the stormtroopers don't ever hit anybody.
No, there's absolutely nothing. No, there's just explosions in the background and so forth. Yeah.
Meaningless rabbit trail.
It's absolutely not happening.
So my point is, the rifling in a gun, you don't get that torque for free. It goes somewhere. So what would happen to you if I were to put a pistol in your hand with a left-hand twist in the riflings? So the beautiful thing about how a pistol kicks, everybody hold out your imaginary finger pistol.
Unless you're in line at
don't
like
do
a Starbucks.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that.
And so
maybe you're going through customs trigger or immigration right now. Don't do it.
So it's a mental finger pistol.
Okay.
Pull the trigger and then let the recoil happen. And if you think about where the muscles are in your forearm, if it goes back towards the side,
It cannot come straight back.
can't
It does not work.
That just
I got tennis elbow again just from simulating it. Thanks a lot, you jackwagon.
But if you come back to the side, boom, boom, boom. Now, what happens if I put a left-handed twist? I don't know if it's left or right, but what happens if I put the opposite rifling in there? The kick's going to be a little different.
Wow.
I've never experienced this, but
that would hurt.
A person that used to shoot match pistols, he told me this matters. I thought it was interesting.
It wouldn't hurt. Here's what you would do. You would compensate improperly, and your wrist would, think about it.
Yeah.
You would just spin, take your thumb.
Yep.
And point it straight up in the air like you're shaking a hand.
Uh-huh.
If you fired a gun that was rifled the wrong way, just twist that thumb straight down.
Yeah.
And point your thumb at the ground. That's what it would do.
That doesn't hurt.
No, it doesn't hurt. I mean, that's where the energy would go, but it doesn't feel like good technique for shooting with accuracy.
What shooters do to take all this stuff into account is, in the rifling thing comes back in to get back on target, right? What Olympic shooters do is they use electric primers in the gun. Olympic shooters use electric primers in their pistols. And so the Olympic pistol shooting stuff, it's more like Star Wars type technology. You're using there's a battery in the gun that fires the bullet. What you can do is you can get rid of all the mechanics and the lock time, but you still have other things to worry about. Whatever element is that makes the primer element fire, you have to put some current in there, and that creates an explosion. So that has to be very repeatable.
Mm-hmm.
But the good news is, if the bullet dwell time is normally 1.5 millisecond and the lock time is normally 8.5 milliseconds, you just eliminated a lot of uncertainty. And we're getting down to the place where we can kind of predict within inches where that bullet's going to be, a few feet from the barrel. It's cool, right?
So pointing the barrels at each other, that's
Easy.
Not that hard.
Easy. Yeah, that's just turning bolts. Yeah.
Right. You could solve for this problem another way. You could get more high-speed cameras and line them up so that they are covering a larger area of potential impact. You could spread out your firearms, and you could afford to be more sloppy with the dwell time and the lock time because you simply have more coverage downrange coming at each other. Now, instead of covering a 16-inch area, you're covering 40 feet.
But
and
even
it's
that,
just a matter then of just finding the right
intercept point.
Even
that wouldn't work because, as you pointed out earlier, bullets drop. Let's say in your head, you've got a gun on your left and a gun on the right, and they're intercepting right in front of your nose. If the one on the left fires first, it's going to come out and it's going to start dropping more. If the gun on your left fires first, the intercept's going to happen to your right a little bit, right of your nose. And that bullet's going to be lower because the bullet on your right is coming out. It's going to be higher. And so you're going to have an off-axis intercept. So you really want them to hit right in the middle.
Yes.
If you're,
The other solution is just so many more bullets.
Yeah, exactly. Just do it 100 times. Yeah.
Yes, just lay on the trigger. I borrow some military grade thing, get a special permit, and just hose bullets at each other until it works.
Or just
and we could actually, next time I'm there, we could do that at no risk with 2 super high powered airsoft guns. You're just not going to hurt yourself. We could literally sit back there on the trigger with guards and shielding. Nobody's going to get, they're airsoft guns. And we could sit there and look at the stream of rounds, and we could just find it working with each other.
The water hose technique.
Until we get the impact that we want.
At one point, I took some training on the minigun, the M134D.
Okay.
I asked the question in training. I was like, how do you aim? And the guy giving the class was like, you ever used a water hose?
Oh, well, sure.
I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, you just kind of look at what's getting wet, and you're like, I don't want that to get wet. I want this other place to get wet.
It's already wet by the time you say that.
And my eyes just got so big. I was like, are you being serious right now? He's like, you get used to it. So basically, yeah, it's crazy.
Did you get used to it?
I did.
Okay, I'm impressed.
Very, very
I'm
quickly.
not used to it. If we ever do that, and I know that it's very unlikely we're ever going to do that, we should get one of those nighttime tracer versions. High speed couldn't catch it up. My airsoft gun, when I was playing that with my buddies all the time, just goofing around.
They have glow-in-the-dark BBs?
Yes.
Really?
I put a tracer system on mine. I'm not kidding.
So you could light up is there an LED that charges up the bullets as they leave the barrel?
There you go. So what I did.
Really?
I had an H&K G35C.
You had me at H&K.
Okay, cool. That was the battle rifle I used for playing airsoft. It was a beast. Now, of course, airsoft rounds are tiny. They're little pellets. And so I had a drum mag, an electric feed drum mag.
So you were really into this.
Oh, I don't know about that.
You had a drum mag, Matt.
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't want to run out of ammo, so I got something that would hold like 3,000
all the
rounds.
ammo. Yeah.
Yeah. But then what happened is there was a barrel attachment that I got that had a sensor for when a round was passing through it. This thing would fire off, was it 11 or 14 rounds a second? It was one of those two. It was a lot.
Wow.
So then what would happen?
So what does it sound like? Do you have it here?
No, I sold it.
What does it sound like when you fire it?
Oh, just, I mean, it's just bullet hose.
Really?
It's nuts. Nuts. You know, people would hear it and just, I could see them take cover at the sound of it. It was great. But what I figured out is I could put this mock silencer. It didn't silence anything. Nothing needed to be silenced in there. And it had this flash bulb in there that would fire. You could set the timing. It would fire for me once every 10 rounds. And so then you just get glow-in-the-dark biodegradable rounds. You don't ever want to play that with something that won't go away. They don't perform as well, but you got to play with the stuff that rain will eat. I just fill this thing with these glow-in-the-dark rounds, or sometimes a 50-50 mixture of glow-in-the-dark and the standard, because glow-in-the-dark's a little more expensive.
I love this.
But then you play at night, and you just get this. It would flash inside the silencer, the mock silencer. It would flash, and that would just be enough to charge a glow-in-the-dark round. And then as it sails, it's bullet hose. You got 3,000 rounds of green bullet hose to put on people in the dark. You know exactly where everything's going. Just tracer rounds. It was the coolest thing ever, man.
I didn't know that technology existed. So it sounds like there's a proximity sensor inside that mock silencer that detects a bullet coming in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like bullet present. Do you call them bullets? What do you call the
pellets?
Pellets.
Yeah.
Pellet present. And then it says, okay, it's here. It's going to take X amount of milliseconds for it to traverse this mock silencer. We can flash it anytime in here because the flash duration is going to be set. It's going to be 10 milliseconds or no, it won't be that. It'll be microseconds. Okay. You took me to a place. I used to take pictures of bullets in my garage. I used Doc Edgerton's technique. Dr. Harold Edgerton at MIT, really amazing guy. When I finished my master's thesis, Dr. Robert Frederick said, I have something for you. I was like, what is it? And it was a book called Electronic Strobe, Flash. That was the name of the book.
Catchy.
Yeah. And it was a beautiful book of all the photos that Dr. Edgerton took with his stroboscope. But the beautiful thing about the book is that it was like the nuts and bolts of how he did it. He's like, well, this is why I use xenon. Xenon has a spectrum that's more like daylight. And, and I also tried to charge these different types of noble gases, and I got a longer pulse duration out of this one at this voltage. And it just tells you like how he figured it all out, because we take it for granted. We're like, oh, I need a flash. No, that flash was the result of a collaboration between the physics department and the MIT department at MIT. It's really cool. All that to say, I used to have a sound detector. It was a speaker, and I would put a speaker, I would wire it up into the electronics thing I had. Anytime that piezoelectric sensor would move, it would give me a voltage. And I would say, oh, I have a voltage. I can now use that to trigger my flash. And so what I would do is I would set my 22 up. I have a video on this on Smart Every Day from the early days. I'd set my 22 up. I would move that speaker downrange of the muzzle, and I would pull the trigger. And then the bullet would exit the barrel, and then the sound from the firing would then make it to the speaker, which would trigger my flash, which would give me a picture of the bullet. Then I was like, oh man, it fired too early.
Did you just move the speaker?
I would just move the speaker.
Oh my goodness.
And how much would I move it? If I was off by one, let's say I was
next to nothing.
No, listen. Let's say if I was off by 1 millisecond, how far would I move the speaker? Exactly.
Yeah.
Isn't that fun?
Yes.
It's great.
It's so much fun.
And so your little, I have a strobe thing that's going to make my bullets glow. That tickles all the right things in my brain.
Yeah.
I can see on your face that you're enjoying the observation of how excited I just got. So
yeah, that's fun. That's fun.
Yeah,
that's fun.
So thank you for giving me that.
Quick question before we get back to the whole strategy, though.
Yeah.
You brought up firing a 22.
Yeah.
In a different scenario where timing it up is the goal, the objective. Now, that's a rim fire round. As a 22 long rifle you were shooting there?
Yeah, in the garage, yes.
That's a rim fire. That's a little different in terms of the ignition initiation. would it be more or less difficult to accomplish what you just accomplished, making bullets collide with a rimfire ignition?
I don't know. I don't know the repeatability of a 22, but I feel like larger primers that are in the center of the cartridge will give you a more even burn. And so I feel like they'll be more repeatable. But what I don't know is how long it takes to crush the primer and ignite the powder. What I would have to do is I would set up an oscilloscope and I would send my trigger to my solenoid to pull the trigger mechanically. And then I would set up my little speaker technique that we just talked about. And I would just do it a bunch of times and I would graph it and I would say, okay, 22s, about 7 milliseconds, plus or minus half a millisecond every shot. Let's say 357 Magnum, 12 milliseconds, plus or minus 100 microseconds every time. So what I would do is I would just test them. I wouldn't care how long it took the bullet to exit. All I would care about is the repeatability of it. Yeah.
The fact that you have the tools, the fact that you just know off the top of your head, oh, here's how I would answer that. That's awesome. I would have to think for a very long time to problem solve that. You just have all those things in your utility belt. That's pretty cool.
I don't know if you know this, but we're sitting here talking and I'm looking behind you at a bunch of books. I see 501 Italian Verbs.
Yeah.
I see a book on China. I see The Living Talmud. I see a lot of humanities books behind you, and those are the tools you have. We just have different skill sets. Yeah, and so if I were to be like, I'm not even going to,
Fair enough.
Yeah. So thank you for the compliment. Also, we just do different things.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I'm enjoying playing around in the world of the things you do. So land the plane for me. How did you finalize this? How did you make two bullets smash together?
We shot one of the guns. The orientation was north and south because we knew we were going to be filming later in the day and the sun would be in the west.
Ah, clever.
Yeah. I mean, we weren't trying to be like, oh, the Civil War, north and south. It's just how it worked out. We fired the north gun and we used that as our datum. And then we aligned the south gun to the north gun.
Mm-hmm.
And we made an adjustment. We said, okay, we only fired the north gun. We got a hole in a piece of paper. We said, okay, let's go to the south gun. Now let's get a laser and let's line it up to that. And let's put a hole in the piece of paper by only firing the south gun. And then we measured the distance that was off. And we said, oh, it was a 1/4 inch off. According to how many threads are on this bolt back here at 54 inches of bullet travel.
Yeah.
We used triangles and we're like, turn it this many turns.
Yeah.
And then we took a shot. We took our first shot and it hit on the first shot. David and I looked at each other and we're like, that just happened. Like we wanted to do a thing and we slowly worked on it. We had all the tools, as you mentioned, and we just slowly used all those tools and we just arranged them together in such a way that it happened. And it was kind of a weird feeling. Like what happens when you think a thing can happen and then you go try to do it and it actually happens? Well, what does that feel like to you? Like have you ever had a goal that you wanted to accomplish and you worked really, really hard to accomplish it and then you did?
I wanted to dunk a thing when I was a younger man. That is, I wanted to jump up, reach above the rim of a 10-foot basketball hoop and put that object in the rim with force. And so I started by thinking, well, I'll try to do that with a basketball. I can jump pretty well. I'll give it a go. Not a tall guy, but I can jump a little bit. Couldn't ever get to a place where I could palm a basketball with my right hand. Like, well, that's out. I won't be able to do this off of my natural jump side with my right hand. I can't palm it. So I kind of did some of the same exercises and stretches with my left. And I was like, I got a little bit bigger left hand. I can palm a basketball with my left hand, but not my right.
Really?
Yeah.
Hold the hand up. How big is that hand?
Not big, but it's shaped the right way to palm a basketball.
You can palm a basketball?
Absolutely. Yeah, I will show you later.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, and control it.
You can actually palm it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But I can't with my right.
I can't
just,
well.
There's something about, look at the flatness I can achieve with this hand.
Yeah.
And look what I can achieve with my right. Can you see that difference?
I can.
My right is a little more clawed up. My left, I can actually invert the fingers.
Is your left hand more powerful than your right?
Right now it is, because I had that tennis elbow injury.
Yeah.
So yeah, right now it's pretty funny. I mean, when I was coming off the injury, I'd go to bench press and the left is just like, go. And the right's like, please don't, please stop, please.
Ow.
I've been so good to you over the years. I just need you to look out for me for once. Okay, whoa, all right, cool. We all got needs. Then I tried to get a basketball up and over the rim, and I just couldn't.
That means you have to jump off your right leg to dunk with the left hand.
I tried a lot of different things to try to make this work. it was very clear, even after I could figured out how to palm a basketball, this just is, it's not going to happen. I can't push this any further. I already feel a little bit scared sometimes coming down. Like it's just unnatural.
You were just way up there.
Yeah, I worked really hard on it. I trained really hard to jump better. I just couldn't do it. So then I went down to a volleyball. Still couldn't do it. I went down to one of those miniature basketballs. I could just tell. And this is over the course of weeks, right? Then I went down to a softball. I was close. Man, there's so many times I was close. There were times I'd go up and I'd push it against the rim and then touch the rim and it would go in, but it wasn't. I mean, it was still a shot. I just touched the rim after.
Yeah.
And then finally, I went through baseball. I went down to tennis ball. And just that slight bit of squish in the tennis ball.
A little more forgiving.
Yeah, it enabled me to kind of jam the ball against the rim just a little on the way up and almost use the ball to roll it over the rim. And that was repeatable. I got it a couple times one day. And that was it. So that was a thing I really wanted to do. And obviously, every dude wants to be able to say, yeah, when I was in college, I could dunk a basketball. I wanted to be able to say that. I knew I'd want to be able to say that when I was an old man. And I can't because I couldn't do it. But I got a tennis ball.
I appreciate the story that you picked. Ended up framing you in a humble light because you are a humble man. But that's not really what I'm talking about.
Okay, here's why I think it is. So I was trying to solve a problem for a year. It was a year of work on that.
Yeah.
I did not approach this from I'm just going to be more athletic. I was very strategic in how I trained and what I did. And I was strategic in carefully analyzing what different item I might be able to finally accomplish this with. And so, no, it was pretty calculated. And when I got to the end of that and it actually worked and I dunked that silly little tennis ball, was over the rim with my fingers, gave the rim a little tug on the way down. I was like, no, that's a legitimate dunk. It's a tennis ball, but it's as legitimate a dunk as a dunk can be with a tennis ball. Yeah, I came down and was like, yeah, there. I could envision that in my mind 9 months or a year ago. And now the thing just happened. That's amazing. This is great.
What do you do with that?
Apparently you never do it again because that was it, man.
It's just a weird thing. There's almost like a mourning that happens because you're like, I had this pursuit of this thing and it was always on the horizon and it was always something I could walk towards. And then you just like walk up to the thing and you pick it up and you're like, okay, I got it. I got the thing.
Yeah.
And then the pursuit of the thing dies in that moment. And you're like, oh, that's not the case in the bullet versus bullet. But in that moment, in that first little moment when I was like, the pursuit was, I want a bullet to hit a bullet. And then that happened. In that fraction of a moment when I saw it happen before my eyes, I was like, oh, we did it. We did it. And I was like, that was it. And then the pursuit changed. The pursuit changed to better pitcher,
okay.
tighter.
Yeah.
Like tighter shot, a different angle. It morphed quickly, but there was this mourning that happened and I felt it. It was like a flash in the back of my mind. Or like the promotion that you're going after or whatever. As a young man, you're very ambitious and you're like, if I can just make salesman of the quarter or whatever it is, and then you get it. And you're like, now what? You know what I mean? It's getting back to the Michael Jordan episode where we're talking about achievement and success. In this case, this is just a thing I really, really wanted to see. And I didn't really care who did it. I just want to see it. I just want this to happen. You know what I mean? And it wasn't happening. Like I kept thinking, somebody's going to do this. And then a year went by and nobody did it. And another year went by. Nobody's done this. I was like, I get to do it.
You get to do it.
Yeah, that's fun. It was a fun thing. So the other cool thing is all the people that were involved. Jeremy making the shielding. I got to call my buddies
Jeremy
out.
shielding. I like the way
Jeremy Fielding made the shielding.
Yeah, that worked.
Another fun thing about it is my buddies from work. I knew that this was dangerous. And I got to call them out and I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. And they instantly said, well, how are you going to? And I was like, just come out and let me show you what I'm doing. And you tell me everything I did wrong. And they're like, what? And I was like, no, seriously, I need you to protect me from me. Please come out come to the field with me, look at this. I'm going to hand you a piece of paper. And so I took it seriously. I did a presentation to them, and I printed out this checklist. I put their name at the top of the checklist, like you would, invite a guest that you really cared about. So Coop and Sheldon, they came, guys that I've worked with for years, done very dangerous things with them. And I was just like, hey, I am laid bare before you. And David and I just showed him everything. And it's a really fun exercise because intellectual humility and the right answer wins.
That's kind of peer review.
Yeah.
Friendly peer review.
Yeah. But it's serious. And what's really fun is these guys have authority in my life. Like when I, work with them, they've been authorities at times, and they've been able to tell me, no, you can't do that. Okay. A younger Destin always pushed against that, not with them, but with other people. I'd push against that. But the older I get, the more I'm like, wow, I have someone in my life willing to take me seriously, whom I take very seriously. I respect them very much. And they're willing to push against me and say no in love. And I think it's very, very important to have people in your life who you can say, here's a thing I'm working on. I need you to critique it and give me negative feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you so much better, and it makes you safer. And it makes you all the things. I can remember being in situations that I won't go into, but I can remember calling a person from somewhere and saying, hey, I'm about to do something dangerous. I've been working with these people here. They're going to let me do whatever I want. And that's a problem because they're not thinking with me and they're not helping me. They trust me too much. I need you to assume the role of not trusting me for a second, and I need you to prove to yourself that this is okay. And then give me permission or don't give me permission based on the quality of my argument. Cool? And they're like, lay it on me. Let's go. Those are some of my favorite discussions because of the intellectual humility involved and the technical prowess of the other person. And you can say things in a very quick moment that they understand at a very deep level. No, you can't do that. Why can't I do that? Well, think about the induction that might happen if you do X, Y, Z. What frequency are you operating at? This? Well, why did you choose that? And it's just like, it's fun. It's so fun.
It's forthright, pure communication too. There is no thing where like, well, if my science says this, you have to vote for my thing. If my science says this, you have to celebrate this idea I have. You have to do it. I mean, when we get into the public sphere, the conversation is completely compromised. We all know.
Because you have people at the table that haven't earned the right to be there.
Yeah, and they're not even using it for the right reason. They don't care about whether or not the thing actually works. They got a completely different thing they want to do. And they know that the goodwill and gullibility of most people, which is how we decide things in our culture, whatever most people think, let that be true. Anything. And science works the same way, and anybody who tells them otherwise is kidding themselves. I don't mean real science. I mean public the science.
Your air quote science.
Yeah, it's just whatever opinion most people have about a thing, regardless of how they got it. Yeah, it's just how science is just true. That's what we all think.
It's interesting. The word science has been politicized, obviously, but like the science doesn't lie. I would argue that depending on your definition of that, sometimes it does.
Right.
The beautiful thing about this is the bullets don't lie.
Right.
It either works or it doesn't.
Yeah, and every version of epistemology, every approach to claiming truth ends up going through the ringer at some point when the hubris kicks in and when it starts being used dishonestly. We just watched it happen to religion, and religion had it coming. Christianity had it coming. Cultural Christianity was making truth claims about ethics and theology and all kinds of stuff that were more just really public consensus than any kind of carefully evaluated thought process. Well, science had its heyday, but now science is also a bit of a cute, funny word because we know there's certain science that just means public consensus regardless of actual reality. And we just do this. We all use knowledge and truth claims to the advantage of things that we like or care about or that are popular because we're insecure and we're weird and we're all busted up in actually very similar ways. But what you're talking about is not that. What you're talking about is capital T truth. You're getting people together. It doesn't matter what they think about anything other than you got a situation here. And it is very important that we solve for all of these things. We're not trying to make a point. We're not trying to beat anybody. Nothing matters other than just getting this right. That's it.
That's so fun.
It's really cool to hear you talk about it. And when I sit and I think about the people in my innermost circle of trust, They might not get everything right, but I trust them all because they're trying to do that with everything. Parenthood, relationships, philosophy,
Oh, yeah.
God, faith, whatever, everything. They're trying. Ultimately, we all got our biases and we got our stuff. But all the conversations feel forthright and honest. And that's the difference between the circle of trust and the world and the conversation at large. And so I think it's cool that, yeah, two bullets hit each other and you filmed it. Cool. But it's the product of people doing actual thought and problem solving and science together with trust in the process and trust in the motives of the people you're talking with. And that's how cool, amazing things get accomplished. I think it's super, super neat, man. I think it's an amazing achievement. Way cooler than dunking a stupid tennis ball. And I congratulate you on it.
Not true, but thank you for the congratulation. Not true that it's way cooler than dunking a basketball because I never did that. Okay, it's really cool.
It's cooler than dunking a
I never
tennis
did that.
ball.
I think you're right to celebrate the teamwork part of it because that part's the most fun. I mean, me sitting there across the table from my buddy Ernie, knowing he has the knowledge of the electronics. George being able to say, hey, you need to do it at this angle. You need to put the camera over here at this angle for these reasons. And David doing all the things David did with the hand loading of the ammunition, Jeremy making shielding that keeps us safe, and my buddies Sheldon and Coop being willing to lend a hand and correct me on the misfire procedures I got wrong. All that stuff's great. And I think that's what makes it so fun. I think the biggest thing about it is I don't care about the YouTube part of it. I just don't. Like this video.
I see that in you.
Yeah, I just really wanted this to happen and I wanted to see it. And
yeah,
just so happens that YouTube is a thing that exists and we all get to share it together and it's fun. The YouTuber, like, I'm going to do this to make a video, be a banger. I just don't care about that. I don't know. It's a weird thing. Of course, I want it to be successful so that I can, frankly, afford to invest in a right-handed twist 1/16 45 caliber barrel that's made out of stainless steel so it won't rust. I care about that part of it because, I don't know. I'm just really glad that I got to see those two bullets smush against each other. And I've got some other ideas about how to make them stick when they hit.
I think it's wild that you went to a battlefield and you looked at a little thing. It's just a simple object.
Smithsonian's where I saw that.
Okay. It's two pieces of metal and they're mushed together. Okay, cool. That's interesting. There are lots of scenarios in the world where a couple pieces of metal mush together, but stuff means stuff. And not all two pieces of metal mushed together means the same thing. That meant something very special. Told a story about a chapter in our history. Told a story about righting some age-old cultural wrongs or trying to. Told a story about families fighting against families. Told a story about military technology and how level the playing field was between those two sides in that moment, and therefore how gritty and ugly that war was going to be, because those are the ones that get really bloody, is when you have the same kind of gear on both sides and it's sort of stalematey. That chunk of metal means so many things. It also has a probabilistic meaning. That just shouldn't happen. Shouldn't happen. The two bullets smashed together like that. There was so much more space for them not to hit. There was so much more time for them not to be fired during simultaneously. It's a 1 in a gajillion kind of thing. And if we say, how likely is it the two bullets would smash together? Well, that's it's just so unlikely. But what is the possibility that those two bullets, in the grand scheme of the cosmos, would even exist? Let alone be on that battlefield the same day, let alone collide in midair. And then you looked at that and all of the meaning surrounding it.
And be found by an archaeologist.
And be found. You looked at that, took into account all of the meaning behind it, or a lot of it, and felt this is a big deal. Thought about all of the probability and how crazy it is that would ever happen. Recognized a crazy fluky thing when you saw it. And then you tried to science your way to duplicating one of the randomest results, a metaphor, that chunk of metal, two bullets fused together. It's a metaphor for a crazy random outlier. And you tried to figure out a way to control all of the variables to such a degree that you could duplicate it again and again, and not just duplicate it, capture it in a way that other people could see what you did for themselves and enjoy it and appreciate it. And I just think it's a really cool journey. I think it's a cool quest to take something that shouldn't be duplicatable and pull it off. So congratulations. I say it again.
Thank you. It's not over yet.
Okay.
We've still got to make the bullets fuse together.
Okay.
And we've got thoughts.
Okay.